The king of NBC Sports, the king of covering the NFL, Peter King, nice enough to join us here for a weekly. Hey, how are you? Now that it is football season once again, it is officially football season once again. Week 1 is in the books, and what we just learned is kind of a question we've been asking. Peter, thank you for joining us here on Damon and Ratto. As always, it's great to have you. I got to be totally honest. A lot of people come to this radio station for a little clarity on what they just saw out of the 49ers, and we have not been able to offer much because I don't know what we just saw, what you can take away, what you can use from a game played in those conditions to really sort of predict or frame how the rest of the year may go. I mean, it is tough to have momentum go from one week to another. Everything happens in kind of its own vacuum, and that's one of the wettest, sloppiest vacuums I've ever seen a football game played in. What did you take away from the 49ers' shocking Week 1 loss in Chicago?
You know, I hate to join the chorus of those who would say you really can't draw any conclusions from it, but I don't see how you draw any conclusions from it. It was played in occasionally a monsoon and surely charitably a muddy track, and the only thing that I thought was a little noticeable or a little bit interesting is that, look, the 49ers won a weather game at Lambeau Field in January. And this is football. You know, this is what it is. And there are going to be a couple of times every year where you have to play in inhuman conditions. That's just the way the sport is. So the only thing I guess I would say about this is, you know, I don't empathize with those who would say, well, you know, the Bears, they're more used to playing in conditions like this and all that. I don't know who ever gets used to playing in conditions like that. It reminds me of a couple of those old games in Candlestick, the Cowboys and 49ers one year, that the championship game that was played, and it was just an absolutely ridiculous, muddy, wet track at Candlestick, in which it was hard to say, well, the best team won. The survivor team wins. And that's really about all I can say. You hate to kick the can down the road, but as far as drawing one bit of conclusion about this year's 49ers, I would just say sometimes you have to play in dog crap conditions, and you have to win in those dog crap conditions. And the 49ers didn't do it. That's not a good thing, but I don't really think you should make that big a deal of it.
How much more difficult is it to make assessments about this game, given the fact that it wasn't pouring down rain the entire game, that it really picked up as the game went on, which meant that you couldn't even judge, well, what kind of adjustments did they make, you know, since they knew the weather was going to be bad and all that. It seemed like at one point in the second half, it just decided to dump, and it dumped the rest of the game. Does it make it even harder to make an assessment?
Yeah, but I think, Ray, that even before then, the fact that if you are, let's just say for the sake of argument, if you're the 49ers and you're trying to figure out, okay, we want to try to figure out if Deebo Samuel can be a factor in this game. I almost think it's better, and I think that Kyle Shanahan did a good job in this way, that I almost think it's better to have him run the ball rather than throw it to him, because throwing is so problematic, and at least with running, you know that he is going to pass the line of scrimmage with the ball in his hand. And I think, I mean, off the top of my head, I think he ran it 8 times, and he only caught a couple of balls. And in a game like this, I don't even know that is any harbinger for the future. You know, because I don't think they want to have Deebo Samuel run it 8 to 10 times a game. I think they'd rather have him be sort of a classic wide receiver. But I don't know, Ray. I don't think you can really draw much conclusions. And again, as I say, I hate to say we're kicking the can down the road, but I think that the game that matters, that'll really start to tell the tale of this team this season, is Sunday against Seattle.
Peter King on 95.7 The Game. Hopefully George Kittle is back, because I do think he is a crucial part of the Niners having success at the line of scrimmage. And their success at the line of scrimmage has always, pretty much powered a pretty robust running game, which for another year in a row loses its starting running back. Hopefully not for the entire year. It should be about 8 weeks for Elijah Mitchell, but this is what Kyle Shanahan had to go through last year when he lost Raheem Mostert right in week 1. And it feels like the 49ers are dealt a major injury in every week 1 that Kyle Shanahan coaches in.
I mean, go back to the Jerick McKinnon years.
Yeah.
When every year they had a big role plan for him and he got hurt right away. And so, I don't know, the 49ers have a weird little thing going on with running backs, and that's why in today's day and age, it helps you to not give them a big load and to have 3 guys on the team who you truly trust.
The number of injuries they've had to running backs, does that suggest simply that the 49ers use their running back more than most other teams? Or is it just hilarious bad luck year after year after year?
Well, I don't know. I mean, getting hurt on a field like Elijah Mitchell got hurt on Sunday, I don't know. I mean, it's like, it's like landing in quicksand or something like that. How do you can't really judge anything based on that. So I don't know exactly what he did, when he got hurt. But I guess my point would be that falls into the category of, I just don't know that you can draw any conclusions on an injury, that was suffered on one of the worst fields to play football on that any of us have ever seen. So, again, it's really unfortunate, but I don't know that you can say, well, another injury to 49er running backs, so it has to be because of X, Y, or Z.
Peter, last week we were talking about how Jimmy is still on the roster, and you basically indicated that they wouldn't have brought Jimmy back if Shanahan had complete trust in Trey Lance. And we went back and forth on that, and, who knows how that unfolds as the season goes along. I thought an indication that he might not have an incredible amount of trust in Trey Lance as a passer was that he actually had 9 design rushing attempts in Chicago, and Lance led the team with 13 rushing attempts, so he just decided to tuck it and run on a few occasions of his own. This puts him like in a category of rushing attempts rarely seen from even quarterbacks who were defined by what their legs could do. Trey Lance has already got 3 games in his career, and in 2 of them, he has carried the ball 13 or more times. Like that, like Jalen Hurts has only done it 5 times in his career. Michael Vick has only done that 4 times in his entire career, and we've now seen Lance do it twice in the 3 games that he started. Again, we got to get back to the fact that it was a monsoon and a really weird day to evaluate how anybody played. But I was surprised that Trey Lance has been used so much in the running game, but not rolled out to help him through a passing game. It's a little weird what Shanahan has cooked up for his young quarterback.
If that happens Sunday, that he runs it 13 to 15 times or 12 to 15 times on Sunday, then I think you see a trend. Here, there's just not enough evidence, in my opinion, to call it a trend. That on that track the other day, I think what you're trying to do is to simply say, okay, what's the best thing we can do to try to move the chains to get in decent position to, at the very least, try to kick a Robbie Gould field goal. That is how I would have coached that game, and I would bet a lot of money that's how Kyle Shanahan coached that game. So again, I don't mean to sort of delay any sort of conclusion at all, but just if he had run it 25 times on Sunday, I wouldn't have been surprised. It just was a terrible day to try to play regular football in Chicago Sunday.
Looking towards Seattle and particularly the game last night, what did you see from the Seahawks that makes you reassess what you thought of them before the season started?
There's two things. Number one is, I think that the thing I found most interesting about the Seahawks was the fact that although none of us really know very much about some of their young players, particularly like Jordan Brooks, who did have a very good year last year, but nobody still really knows him, okay? So, like, if you look at Jordan Brooks, who had, I think, 12 tackles last night, here's a guy who the Seahawks let Bobby Wagner go because they felt that they had the next Bobby Wagner in Jordan Brooks. Whether he'll be as good as Wagner, who knows? But you just have a bunch of guys, like, for instance, Jordan Brooks, Cody Barton, another linebacker who is a young guy, who really made life tough for Russell Wilson last night. And then, I think also one of the most underrated players in football, in my opinion, is Quandre Diggs. I think he's a great safety who just gets credit for being an okay safety, which I think is unfair to him. And so now, especially because Jamal Adams is going to be out for a while, all energy and all focus goes to Quandre Diggs. So I think they've got a very interesting young team with a lot of speed on defense and a lot of guys you've never heard of before. And again, look, nobody expected, especially the kind of first half that you saw out of Geno Smith. And Geno Smith was fabulous in the first half last night. And I think he was okay in the second half. He didn't lose the game in the second half, but he had a great first half, and he gave them enough of a lead that Denver just couldn't catch up, or maybe they could have caught up until one of the worst calls I've seen in recent years happened at the end of that game.
I thought it was stunning that Russell Wilson basically didn't go into the press conference saying they're not paying me $245 million to watch 64-yard field goal attempts. What are we doing?
But hang on. Russell Wilson is not throwing his coach under the bus in the first game of his Denver Broncos career, which he told me in the summer he hopes lasts 10 years. That's just not what you do.
No, but he could call a timeout. He could say, I'm making an executive decision right here. I'm calling the timeout, because that's the right thing to do.
But there was a timeout, and he went to the sidelines, and they put the kicker in. So he had enough time, if he wanted to tell the head coach, don't do this. Let's talk about this, whatever. And he didn't do that. So there's a time, if you vehemently disagree with something, to do something about it. And that time is not, in my opinion, at the post-game press conference. If he thought that the coach was making a horrible mistake, he should have said something at that time. Now, the problem with the decision that was made is that clearly, Nathaniel Hackett thought at the end of that game that he would give trust to his kicker, who told him, if you get into the left hash of the 46-yard line, I can make that field goal, because he made it in pregame warmups. But here's the problem with this. Every game, and I mean every game, a coach asked his kicker, where are you good from? What can you make tonight or today? What's your line of demarcation? And he'll tell them. And look, I'm not saying that Brendan McManus lied or anything, but what I am saying is that the longest field goal he has made in his career is 61 yards.
And 6 years ago, though, right? I mean, that's a thing. Like 64-yard field goals are 2 for 41 in the history of football. I mean, it's not a percentage play. Russell Wilson getting 5 more yards was the right play. It was.
Of course it was.
It was a ridiculous coaching decision. Peter King here on 95.7 The Game. Look, we don't want to spend too much time on Seattle, even though they're coming in next. But I tell you, Kyle Shanahan has a reputation, Peter, of being, this wunderkind coordinator of offenses. But I think what he's also getting a little reputation is a guy who blows a lot of 10-point leads, which, considering how married he is to ball control and not risking it with an overly aggressive passing attack, and he wants to dominate the line of scrimmage with a running game. At what point does Kyle Shanahan's reputation for blowing 10-point leads start defining him more than the promise of buzz around how good he is at coaching? I mean, at what point do we say Kyle Shanahan might be a little overrated here?
Well, I didn't even know that until you just said it about the 10-point lead. But I think that, clearly.
Could you do me a favor and move your phone a little bit closer to the screaming ambulance?
Yeah, it's unbelievable. It's been quiet around my neighborhood, and so I just thought I would sit outside and do it there. And all of a sudden, we've got Armageddon in our neighborhood. Anyway, I think the one point I would make about that is, honestly, when things aren't going good for a team, if a couple of weird plays hadn't happened in this game and the 49ers won, and not that we wouldn't be paying attention to some of the negatives, but that just strikes me as one of the things that is that comes up when you continue to not play well in the second half of games. And again, I think, in my opinion, you just can't judge anything very sincerely about what happens in this game. Now, let's see what happens in the next few weeks. But I don't know. That's the kind of thing I can't take very seriously after a game like they had in Chicago.
You wrote yesterday that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch sort of polled the 49er player leadership, asking, we got to make sure you're going to have Trey's back here. Is this a recognition that maybe Shanahan has to do a bigger selling job on Lance's behalf than we originally thought, and that maybe he's going to have to keep doing it?
Well, all I did was quote Jay Glazer, and I attributed that to Glazer in my column.
You did.
And here's the thing. That was interesting to me, okay? And the reason it's interesting to me is because it says to me that Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch know that there are quite a few players on this team who are very much who are very good friends with Jimmy Garoppolo. And they also know that in the NFL, sometimes life moves on. So I think all they were trying to do is just kind of, they were just trying to seal that potential problem, which, and who knows if it ever would have become a problem. But I think they were just trying to say, hey, listen, let's just make sure we're all in on Trey's side, okay? And we know what this year is. We know there are going to be some times that might be rough times, but we are not in this, and we're not going to be shaky about this. We are going with Trey Lance, and we just want you guys to know. We want you to support it and all that. And so you would assume that most of the guys, if not all of them, just said, hey, no problem. We're fine with that. But I do think that when I heard that sort of opened my eyes and said, you don't do something like that unless you think that you need to do it, And so I just thought it was interesting. I don't think it's a huge story, but I just think it's interesting and just another way that they wanted to ensure that the players on this team know that Trey Lance is our quarterback.
We have very little time left, so a quick answer. Are you surprised, Peter, that the Dallas Cowboys are not more outwardly interested, if not in Garoppolo, but bringing in someone to help them through this Dak injury?
When you think about what it would take to get Garoppolo, if I were the 49ers, I wouldn't even listen unless the offer was a 2. And if you're the Cowboys, is it worth the 2 to trade a guy who might play 3 or 4 games? Probably isn't. So, no, I'm not that surprised. And I think what it means is that there's an understanding of how difficult it is to come in and learn a brand new offense and get ready to play in a matter of days. And so, no, I'm not that surprised. I wouldn't have been shocked if they did it, but if they did it, it would have been a sign that Dak Prescott was going to be out for a lot longer than they have said.
We spent the entire offseason talking about we'll get to week 1 and we'll start getting answers on the 49ers, and we have to wait still another week. And that's the kind of week 1 it was around the NFL. Peter, thank you so much. Always a pleasure.
My pleasure, guys. Thank you.